Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, my 58th podcast, or number 19 in Season 2 if you're keeping score. It's great to be back with you, and today I have two wonderful conversations to share with you. I'll begin by bringing back one of my former podcast guests and a former student of mine and a very dear friend, John Armato, who's going to talk about a recording project that he conceived, developed, and realized. He shares some wonderful stories, backgrounds, and insights that I know you are going to really enjoy. My second conversation is with two of the leaders of an event that is happening online from January 6 to 8, 2022, and it's called the Ultimate Music Business Summit. We'll speak with Dr. Heidi Begay and Dr. Garrett Hope, and they will fill us in on the details of this wonderful opportunity to ignite curiosity and give you some ideas on how to develop your entrepreneurial skills, things you will need to have as you continue to navigate our ever-changing world. And before we get to those two wonderful conversations, I have something to share. I just read it, and it is something that I wish I had been able to formulate clearly when I was in the heat of the battle, teaching band and working with a group of young people. What many of you don't know is that I'm a huge sports fan. No one sport in particular, but I do love sports. And I can do without boxing or cage fighting. But give me football or basketball or baseball, and especially golf, and I'm in. Well, I just finished a book written by Marty Smith. He's an ESPN popular, recognized reporter. His book is called Never Settle: Sports, Family, and the American Soul. It's a book of about 24 chapters, none of them too long, and they all have a story and share an insight or an experience he had. Well, this one quote can be found on page 213, and it deals with working as a member of a team. He attributes the quote, or at least the idea of the quote, to Alabama football coach Nick Saban, and it deals with preparation. And it reads, "Preparation is something you can control. Demand it of yourself. Do your job to the absolute pinnacle of your ability, every time, every repetition, so that your brother has the same opportunity to perform at his optimum level, and thereby, collectively, you can achieve your greatest potential as a unit." Think about that for a minute. Think about that in an ensemble situation. If one person doesn't perform to the best of their ability, then there's no way the others can perform to the best of their abilities either. If you play out of tune, everybody's out of tune. If you play with poor articulation or style, the group sounds sloppy and lacks clarity. If you play with disregard for volume, then the ensemble loses its balance. The responsibility we have for and to each other is limitless. As we end the year and look to the new year, let's all make a resolution to do our best, every minute, every day. Do our best so that not only we can achieve the best that life has to offer, but that everyone else has that same opportunity. It has to start with somebody, so why not make that somebody you? I'll be right back with John Armato.
Today's podcast is made possible through the support of Hal Leonard, publisher of the Essential Elements Method for Band and the Essential Elements interactive website that is free for Essential Elements users. Essential Elements Interactive, or EEI, is a state-of-the-art, cloud-based support program that is constantly evolving to provide you and your students with more information and resources to help them learn and have fun while doing so. To learn more about EEI, visit essentialelementsinteractive.com.
Well, this next guy is one of my very favorite people in the world. I just tell you what, when you're a teacher, you get these students every once in a while that just amaze you. And the cool thing is that they continue their relationship with you beyond the time that they're in school. And this guy and I go back probably 40 years. And I still remember getting a letter from him and saying, I'm going to be coming into your high school band next year, mister, and you better be prepared. And I was, and the rest is history. But this is John Armato, and John is, I'll fill him in on who you are in just a second. But John, welcome back to the podcast, buddy.
Oh gosh, Charlie, what a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. It's always a treat to talk to you.
Well, to bring our listeners up to speed, in case they didn't listen to our conversation, it was my 5th podcast. And so that was back in April 6th of 2020. And I mentioned you were a student in my high school band. It was like late 70s, early 80s. And you went on to college, you studied music a little bit, and then you found your calling, which I think, I don't know what you think your calling is, but I think your calling is the world of messaging. You're an absolutely phenomenal communicator. But today you serve as a senior partner and creative strategist for Fleshman Hillard, which is a worldwide public relations and marketing strategy company. And I guess it was founded in St. Louis, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. 1946 in St. Louis.
Something like that. But way back when you started playing the drums, and I want to chat with you for a minute today on the podcast about you're still playing the drums, but I want you to talk about your first drum lesson and your first drum teacher.
That's great. So, one of the things I tell people is that first lesson was as meaningful to me as my own birth date, the date I got married. I suppose you could say the date I got divorced as well. I remember, we all have our milestone dates. But May 27th, 1972 was my very first drum lesson. And that date is vivid for me because it was just such an important experience. I had been begging my parents for drum lessons, and they couldn't find a teacher that would take anybody under the age of 8. And so 1 week after my 8th birthday, I took my first lesson with a guy named Eddie Oyer, who taught in the Northeast community of Kansas City. And the thing that I've learned to appreciate over the years about Eddie, first of all, he was just sort of a remarkable guy in that he was sort of the last of a all-around entertainer breed. He played piano, drums, guitar, clarinet, accordion, organ. He tap danced, did acrobatics, and did ventriloquism. I mean, he was just...
And he drove the bus.
And he drove the bus. Vaudeville never died for Eddie Oyer. That was just, he was the all-around entertainer, primarily a pianist, but he could teach anything. He had a good knack for that. And what I've learned to appreciate over the years is that starting with that very first lesson, he wanted me to make music, not just learn drums. And so there was a drum set and a piano side by side, and he got me started with, the grip and the stroke and that sort of thing. And even in that very first lesson, he taught me a simple beat. He used sort of a mnemonics system. So right and both then, it was boom, boom, bop, boom, 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 bop. And then he'd play piano, and we made music on day one. And I will never get over how incredibly cool that is to not just learn the drums, but to make music from day one.
And now here you are some 40 years later. And the one thing that's remained a constant in your life through all those dates that you remember, and some you'd like to forget, I guess, is that you still play the drums. And so the reason I want to had you back on the podcast, in addition to just catching up and hearing your voice and your incredible insight into things, is I want you to share with our listeners about an idea that germinated with you and that you developed and dogged and earlier this year finally realized, and that being the production of your first recording. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, it's almost overwhelming to think about. So, music is the one thing I've done longer than anything else in my life. The drums literally have been there my whole life. And as you mentioned, I studied music in college, thought I was going to get a music degree. You inspired me. I thought I'd be a band director. I ultimately decided that I wasn't cut out for it. Got my degree in communications, but I always played professionally, semi-professionally, whatever the right categorization would be. But I had an experience, we can talk about it in a little bit more detail in a second, but that planted the seed about 40 years ago, summer of 81. I had an experience where I got this idea for an album that would be called The Drummer Loves Ballads. And it was just an idea that I carried around with me, for the longest time. And then as you get older, you realize that time is not infinite. And in 2016, I was in New York with my buddy John Couchon, who's a world-class drummer. And I realized if I didn't have an accountability buddy on this, I was never going to make it. And I realized if I didn't start working on it now, I'd never make it, because you just, tomorrow's never come. And so I asked John if he'd produce this thing with me, and he said yes. And so that started the process. And we planned for a year. We recorded over 3 years in 10 cities with, 10 recording sessions over 3 years in 4 different cities with 28 musicians. And May 27th, 2021, exactly on my anniversary of my first drum lesson, we released The Drummer Loves Ballads.
That's pretty cool. John, when you say time is not infinite, I always say that, there's the proverbial hill, and the young people listening, you're going up the hill and you're seeing blue sky and you'll stand for anything. And once you get to that point where you're over the hill and you start seeing dirt, man, you go kicking and screaming. And you got this bucket list of stuff you got to get done, right? So you fulfill the bucket list.
This is, well, we both are chuckling about it. It's so true. But the thing I'm most proud of is not necessarily that I put out an album. It's kind of tempting to call it my first. I don't know if there'll be a second, but it is. It's probably the one thing I can point to where I really say, look, I intentionally made this happen. There was this thing that sort of haunted my dreams that I finally turned into reality. And look, me. I mean, I have all kinds of ideas that I don't put into action, and it's easier not to do things than to do things. And it's just really satisfying to say, that thing, I turned an idea into reality, and that's very gratifying.
Yeah. And the disc starts out with a great story. And I want you to share that with our listeners, because it sets the stage for the entire album, which is just absolutely wonderful. So tell that story.
Yeah. And feel free to drop it in from the CD in the podcast if you'd like. But this was the genesis of the entire thing. I was 17 years old, summer of 81. And I had gone to, it was basically my first real jazz festival of some sort. I forget the details, but there's concerts and clinics, and there were some student workshops and some jam sessions. And jam sessions are a real mixed experience. Theoretically, it's a chance to explore music with other people and learn from other people and all these sorts of things. But really, it's a forum where everyone just tries to play higher, louder, and faster than everybody else. And so I had gone to this, essentially my first ever jam session, and everybody was calling burners, and we had played something like Cherokee. It's just 32 choruses of people trying to play as many notes as possible, that sort of thing. And the sax player in charge turns around after the end of this last burner, and he says, "What do you guys want to play next?" And at this point in my life, I'd already decided I had an affinity for ballads. And so I said to this guy, "How about a ballad?" And he just looked at me like I was insane. And he says, "What's the matter, man? Are you tired?" Like the only reason to play a ballad would be, your arms are worn out or whatever. I'm like, no, I just love ballads. And he just ignored me and turned around and kicked off another tune, but in my mind, I had pictured like this thought bubble over this guy's head. It's like, I'm trying to run a jam session and the drummer loves ballads, just couldn't believe it.
That is awesome.
And that's literally where the title and the concept came from. And I, carried that idea of the drummer loves ballads around with me for decades before I made it happen. But that's where the title came from, and that set the whole thing in motion.
Well, it's certainly a personal glimpse into your life that you share with the listeners, and it's got some incredible tracks to it. And there's a couple of related stories I want to delve into. And the first one is about your mom and dad when they were young.
Oh.
And they went to this club in Kansas City. I believe it was the Trocadero.
Yep.
Talk about that.
Yeah. It's still even very emotionally fresh for me. This was a really interesting experience. So there's sort of two stories here: the story of the song itself and the story of how I came to write the song or co-write the song. I wrote the lyrics, and Wayne Hawkins, the pianist on the album, wrote the music. But I mentioned that John Cushon, my buddy, was producing this. He doesn't like the word producer, but he was helping make this whole album happen. And I would periodically go to Kansas City, and I would stay with John and his wife, Alita Adams, who many people will recognize as a exceedingly popular singer. And we were doing some planning in there at their home. And at one point, Alita said, "Now, John, you're going to include an original on the album, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, Alita, I don't really write, I'm not a composer." And she said, "You could do it. You've got something to say. You should try this. You should put an original on there." And I've just, in retrospect, I continue to be in awe of her just absolute confidence in me that I could do something like this. So I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about a thing that my folks always said whenever they heard a beautiful ballad. And they would, especially something like a great sort of voo tenor sax, kind of composition. Either mom or dad would say, that's just the kind of music we used to hear at the Troc. And I can remember them saying this when I was a little kid, all the way through up until they died. And the Troc was the Trocadero, 39th and Main in Kansas City, Missouri. And my folks started dating. They dated for 1 year. They started dating in 1955, and they would go to the Troc pretty regularly. That was their neighborhood place to go hear live jazz. And it was a little club that would have like a trio, maybe a quartet. And that became their benchmark for what a really great live jazz sound was. And so I just decided to tell that story. And I wrote At the Trocadero to convey not only their experience dating, but how it became this bittersweet reference for them as they aged, when they could no longer dance to the music and those sorts of things. And the especially bittersweet part for me is that my folks died before the album came out. And that's, boy, if that's not a lesson in the importance of doing things when you can, I don't know what is. But I was able to get a rough mix of that one tune completed in time that I played it for them on their 63rd wedding anniversary. And so they got to hear the song. They got to hear the story that I wrote for them. But then mom died just a few months later. And because that was in June, she died in September of 2019, and then dad died 8 months later. So anyway, that's the background on how that song came to be. And a wonderful friend, Lisa Henry, does the vocal on it, and a just outstanding sax player in Kansas City named Doug Talley, who's a brilliant music educator, very well respected in the Kansas City area. He plays tenor on it, almost like one of the characters in the song.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love that. It's just because it's just so personal, and knowing your mom and dad as I did, I can just imagine all that. That's really cool. And so as I'm, you were kind enough to send me an advance copy, and I listened to it and I loved it. And everything's going great. And then all of a sudden there's this angelic voice that appears on this next song, on the song, what was it? The Shadows of Paris.
Shadows of
I'm
Paris.
looking at it, and her name is what? Lucy Winjans? Is that right?
What Winans is the pronunciation.
Winans.
It's a Dutch name.
I'm sorry, Lucy Winans, and she sings Shadows of. And what a voice and what a styling. So we're talking about this, and you say, man, there's a connection here. So talk about that connection.
Everything connects, as the 21st century designer Charles Eames says. Everything connects. That's what we as creative people have, is our experiences and our relationships. And one of the relationships that I still have from high school is a dear, dear friend named Lisa Smith, who was in band. You were a band director. She was 1 year behind me. She was in the flag corps at Winnetonka. And the Smiths and the Armatos all had multiple kids go through that school. We all kind of knew each, at our own age level. And Lisa was my peer, and we just became friends back then, and lost a little touch after high school and college, and then got back in touch and are very close to this day. Well, she at one time was married to a piano player named Brom Winans, who's very popular in the Kansas City area. He's a bit of a modern legend as a stride pianist, and he's from the Netherlands, and just an incredible player. And Lisa and Brom had twins, Sana and Lucy. And Lucy became enamored with music and decided that she wanted to be a singer. And so I started hearing her probably when she was in high school. And I've known her since she was a toddler. And she was doing high school musicals and all this sort of stuff. And then got into a jazz program at SUNY Purchase in New York. And all of a sudden she's studying with people like John Faddis and Pete Malinverni. And, she's got an Ella Fitzgerald Foundation scholarship, and she's doing a residency at the Birdland with the Birdland Big Band. And she's just doing great things. But she has this extraordinary voice, incredible range, great breath control, just really precise vocalist, and tells a story. She knows how to interpret a song, and she's, young 20s. She's just talk about the upward side of the hill. She's looking at blue sky. And I just, there's a certain point before I'd even really gotten very far in the album, I'm just like, I want to put Lucy on something. I just love her sound. And I love the connection to her mom and the family and our history at Winnetonka together with you. And so once I decided on Shadows, I just thought, I think that's the song for her. And she killed it. She knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, it's spectacular. I mean, it's angelic. It's whipped cream. It's like, amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. It is.
Well, and it's actually, I can tell you that from the stats that I get occasionally from Spotify and Apple and that sort of stuff, that is the most popular piece on the album. Mm-hmm. Shadows of Paris is the most played. I've been fortunate. I've gotten radio play around the world, and that's the tune that people like to play.
That's cool. Well, another thing I find amazing, and as your old teacher, I find it so rewarding that music's remained such an important part of your life. And you had an idea and you pursued it, and actually expanding way beyond playing the drums. I mean, now you set up the arrangements, you wrote some lyrics, you wrote your own tune, you got the musicians, the recording, the editing, the promoting this project. Man, you've done it all.
Well, I tell people, I remember at some point when I was young, hearing the reference to the phrase Renaissance man. And I was a humanities student, liberal arts student, loved all kinds of different areas of study. And at some point when I was really young, I'm like, I want to be a Renaissance man. I love the idea of this convergence of different disciplines and the amazing people in the past who did all these different kinds of things. Now, I think I ended up probably being a dilettante, somebody who dabbles and maybe doesn't really excel at any one thing in particular, but I've always loved writing. I've always loved music. I've always loved graphic design. That was the earliest part of my professional career. I've had all these different pieces of interests in my life. And one of the things that's been gratifying about the Drummer Loves Ballads is, when it's your money and your project and your idea, there's no one there to tell you no. So, I got to do a certain amount of the design and bring in other artists to create things according to my wishes. And I got to tell stories, and I got to write lyrics, and I got to bring in all of my interests in one fashion or another, the branding and marketing piece of my day job career and the messaging, as you mentioned. So this was a mortar and pestle for me, and I just ground it all up and spit it out as this whole project.
Yeah, and being your old high school band director, I look back and I go like, man, to help kids take music and expand it beyond their horizons, beyond just playing in band or jazz band or marching band or whatever kind of band people have. If you were talking to me back then with the knowledge that you have now, or you're talking to another teacher now and saying, we got to expand kids' horizons, maybe beyond the band room. What advice would you give them?
Well, I love this question, and I'm really passionate about this. I've been thinking about this a lot. I think that we are in a golden age of music making. I don't know that we're in a golden age of music. I'm a little bit of I'm in the you kids get off my lawn sort of and turn that music down kind of phase of my life. So I'm very snobbish about what I like and what I don't like, I suppose. So I don't know that this is necessarily the height of an era of composition or creativity, but man, you can make music in a way that simply has never been possible in history before. And I think this is an exciting thing. I used to think about, and I may be sort of colorizing history with my own sense of romance here, but there was an era where every parlor had a piano in it, and families learned to play music together, and they provided sort of their own entertainment. At least that's sort of the snapshot you get through different parts of cultural history. And I always thought it was kind of too bad that we sort of lost that. Ted Gioia, who's a fantastic musicologist and music historian that I love to read, wrote a book called A Subversive History of Music. And he talks about how the audience actually had to be invented. There hasn't always been this performer-audience relationship, but music has always been there in healing songs and work songs and lullabies and all of these kinds of things. And it was a split in time when we started performing for audiences. Well, I feel like we're back to a point where we can create and share without necessarily having to be a performer in front of an audience. And I think that is a really amazing thing. I put a fair amount of money into this, and I'll never make all my money back. But you can record with a violist in Bremen, Germany, like I did, and he can send you the track to his solo at the end of Shadows of Paris. The accordion player in Nashville sent me his tracks for the Shadows of Paris. Lucy recorded her tracks for the Shadows of Paris in New York, and we did the rhythm section and the orchestra in Kansas City. All of that interconnectedness makes it so much easier to create music. And then you can go to CD Baby and push a button and have worldwide distribution on streaming platforms. It's remarkable. So I'm rambling a bit here, but I think the thing for me in terms of music education is let's keep helping kids understand that music is not strictly a performance art. It's not strictly a school experience. It's not, you've got two choices. You can go into music education or you can be a performer. No, you have endless choices. If you love music, you can make music, and you can share your music on a level that's never been possible before. And the technology's never been more accessible, and everybody can explore this for the rest of their lives. And you don't have to give up that music making experience, because this is the golden age of music making.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it doesn't have to be a career change. I mean, like you're so successful in your position with Fleshman Hillard, but you've continued the drums. I mean, it's been your hobby. It's right. I mean, so it becomes more of an avocation, doesn't it?
I think that's absolutely true. Hobby, I think sometimes gets a little pejorative connotation. I like avocation. Because to me, it's this is in some ways the deepest part of me. music was born with me. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, everybody who's listening to this probably understands that. You just don't know how to explain it. But somehow those sounds reached inside you and squeezed your heart. And so I've just never been willing to let it go. And I've been fortunate. I've gotten to play professionally. Semi-pro is probably a better way of putting it. I've done a lot of it. I've had a lot of musical experiences that were pinnacle experiences. And it's been a real treat to be able to get to do that while pursuing all these other things that I've continued to love in my life, and that made for, candidly, probably a more financially profitable career than if I had just tried to do gigs, but yeah, absolutely. Music can be a permanent part of your life. And I just think that is something that is so powerful to say to kids in the classroom.
So how can I get a copy of the album or the disc? How can I do that? I'm listening and go like, okay, well, I want to get this. How do I do that?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to give it a plug. The simplest answer is it is available everywhere you buy, download, or stream your music. So it's on all the major platforms: Apple Music, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, all those sorts of places. It's on Amazon. Just search for The Drummer Loves Ballads. And probably the most satisfying place to buy it is from the website. So if you go to the drummerlovesballads.com, there is a store component of the website. And I say satisfying because if you buy it directly from me through the website, it's just, I like to be in touch with people who are buying it, and I'll write you a little note, and I can sign the CD, and I can do things that I can't do if you buy it through Amazon or other places. But yeah, it's streaming, it's downloadable as an MP3 album, and it's available as a physical CD. Amazon and my website are probably the easiest places to get it. But
and if they go to your website, do they get that cool little book that you put with it, or is that just
so it's actually a separate purchase? Yeah, it's a separate purchase, but it is available only at the website. So you're talking about what I call the cocktail companion. So this was kind of just a fun thing that was an outgrowth of writing at the Trocadero. So one of the lyrics I wrote was sort of to root this in time, to set the stage for the fact that they were visiting this club in the 50s. And so I wrote cocktails and jazz, that cool 50s craze. And at some point when we were recording, I think I heard Lisa sing that line. I thought, oh, cocktails and jazz. We ought to do a little cocktail booklet. And in my day job at Fleshman Hillard, I'm in touch with all kinds of creative people. And there's a staff member in our office who is a recipe developer and mixologist. And I went to her and I said, her name's Amanda Frew. And I said, I want you to listen to the album, and let's pick 5 tunes together that you think would be good source of inspiration for custom cocktails you can create. And then, so I hired her as a freelancer after hours, and she did that. And then the art director that I work with in our office, her name is Trisha. And I said, I want you to design this booklet. I'm going to hire you as a freelancer. And so we created Cocktails and Jazz, that cool 50s craze, 5 custom craft cocktails inspired by the music of the Drummer Loves Ballads. So you can buy that on the website as well.
Yeah, and even if you hate music, the bartender book is just the killer, man. It's the bomb. It's, you got to I set that out. People go like, yeah, this is cool. Where'd you get this? Well, I got this kid that is a student with an album, and
I had to do a couple of tastings. Amanda came by the apartment and mixed each of the drinks for me. And boy, at the end of each of those sessions, I was happy.
I'll tell you. Well, it gives you motivation.
Drinks. They really are.
John, there's no words for me to adequately express my pride for you and for the value I place on our friendship that's evolved since those first days in high school band. I mean, you are an amazing person. And I want you to value every minute I get to chat with you. And I just thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast to talk about The Drummer Loves Ballads. What a great title. The Drummer Loves Ballads, right? Yeah. Everybody should love ballads.
Thank you.
And you filled in some of the backstories and all that good stuff.
I love you, buddy. You and I have shared so much for so many years, and there was no one more important in my formative years outside of my family than you were. And you've always been a mentor and a friend and a truth teller to me. And I can't tell you what that means. You are as responsible for the Drummer Loves Ballads as anybody else.
Well, you're very kind. And the next time we're going to get together, we're going to crack open that book and have a couple of cocktails and listen to some ballads. How's that?
I think we should. Thanks for this. This was fun. I appreciate it.
I just love talking to John Armato. He is one of the clearest thinkers I have ever been around, and I'm as proud of him as I could ever be. His disc, The Drummer Loves Ballads, is terrific. And after our conversation ended, he let me know that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, yes, one of the greatest basketball players in NBA history and a true jazz aficionado, wrote about John's CD in his personal newsletter. And in typical John fashion, he posted a thank you to Kareem, which was met by a personal, "You're welcome and keep up the good work," from the legend himself, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It's an amazing story that keeps on developing. And John, I am so proud of and happy for you. Know that you will always get an A+ in my class. We'll be right back with Dr. Heidi K. Begay and Dr. Garrett Hope to talk about a really unique and special program they, along with a whole host of music luminaries, will be presenting, the Ultimate Music Business Summit.
Vandercook College Music is proud to support Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Vandercook is the only college in the nation solely devoted to the practical education of the school music teacher. If you have a student who wants to teach music, or if you or someone you know is looking for a great, practical Master of Music education program, then look no further than Vandercook College of Music in Chicago, Illinois. Vandercook also has the largest array of on-campus and online classes in their Mecca continuing education program. To learn more about Vandercook, visit vandercook.edu.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I received a wonderful message from our next guest who mentioned that we had a lot of people in common that we knew, like Dr. Bill Ballinger and Al Shin, a good friend who just recently passed, and some other folks. And she mentioned that they have this event coming up in early January and asked if I might just give it a little plug on the podcast. And I said, well, we got to do a lot better than that. So we got to have you on as a guest. So I asked her if she would do that. And she said, absolutely. And so this morning, she's here with her colleague, and they're going to talk about a really special event. And joining us is Dr. Heidi K. Begay and Dr. Garrett Hope. And they're going to talk about an event that's coming up on January 6th to 8th of 2022. But before we get to that, Heidi, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and how music became a part of your life, where you went to school, and all the good stuff you're doing now.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Charlie, for having us and for carving out time for us. We greatly appreciate it. So the support is tremendous and it just blows my mind. So thank you for that. I'm originally from Chicago. I don't know if you can tell from my nasally accent voice, but I'm originally from Chicago, and I went to school in Arizona, Louisiana, and Texas. And somehow Texas found me. My husband and I moved to Fort Worth about 2009 to start working. And I've been in Texas ever since. So that's a little bit of my background and my degrees. But going back further, music found me through actually an unfortunate event. Before I was a musician, I was actually a ballerina. And I was starting to learn point and I was doing really well. But I had an accident where I did a turn, fell, and I fractured my L5 vertebra. And so at 13, I needed something different. I needed to have a new creative outlet. And really, the flute found me. And I remember being in a band hall with the current band director, Mr. Riddle, and that is his real name, Mr. Riddle.
Bill Riddle?
And yes.
Yeah, I know Bill.
Oh my goodness. I see him like a second father. He is phenomenal.
Yeah, he's a great teacher.
Our worlds collide that much more. I feel like you and I, Charlie, are best friends now. So yes, Bill Riddle is phenomenal, and he actually just retired, I believe, a few years ago.
He was at Westmont, right?
He was at Westmont, and then he went over to York High School. I believe that was in Elmhurst, Illinois.
Yes. Great school.
Yeah.
Both great schools, great programs. You have a good pedigree then.
Oh, good. Yeah, and so Bill showed me a flute, and I just fell in love with the sound. I fell in love with the aesthetics of the instrument, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. And Dr. Hope, how about you?
Sure. Well, I've always been doing music, and I mean that quite literally because my mother was an elementary school music teacher, as well as the church choir director and worship director. And so from the moment I could stand and open my mouth, I've been on stages singing and then later playing instruments. So I've just always done it. Piano lessons and then played clarinet in band all the way through university. But when I was in middle school, I picked up a guitar for the first time. And it was like that scene in Harry Potter when he goes into Ollivander's wand shop and they go through all the wands and finally grabs the right one and sparks come out the end. And that's what it felt like to hold this instrument. It's like, this is it. And I just, you fall in love with playing and you want to spend your whole time doing it. So ended up bachelor's in music, master's in theory and comp. And then I was teaching adjunct in several places, driving a ridiculous amount of miles and trying to cobble together a living when I decided to go and get the doctorate so I could pursue tenure track teaching. And that's when I got my DMA in composition from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I grew up in Colorado, by the way, to answer your first question. And I have been teaching in academia since 2005 in a variety of roles. But in the last several years, I've been moving away from that. I'm currently no longer teaching because I've pivoted all of my skills towards entrepreneurship. And one of the things I believe in firmly is that to be a successful musician in the 21st century means that we need to know how to run our businesses. And first and foremost, we are small business owners. If you file a Schedule C, if you receive 1099 income, then you are, in the eyes of the IRS, a business. And so there's things you can do to reduce your tax burden and to maximize your income and maximize your impact and to serve people better. And that's the mission I'm on. So I have a podcast of my own called The Portfolio Composer, where I speak with composers about building their businesses and thinking businessly in the 21st century. And I write music and I coach people, and we'll probably cross paths in a month because I come to the Midwest Clinic and have a booth, and I have a few performances this year going on, and that's my story in a nutshell.
That's great. So what instrument did you play before you went to the dark side with the guitar?
Well, piano and clarinet. It's funny because when it was time to choose a band instrument, I said, I want to do saxophone. And my mom, okay, now I'm going to throw my mom under the bus a little bit because she grew up playing clarinet and we had a clarinet in the house already. And she looked at me and she said, you're going to play a real orchestral instrument. And that's how I ended up on clarinet. Wow. I give her so much grief about that all the time now. But guitar, I started university as a guitar major, and then at the end of my first year, I actually switched to bass. So I graduated as a bass major, studying classical and jazz.
So how did the two of you hook up then, Heidi, with this project?
Oh my goodness. The SparkNote version is I met Garrett a year ago, actually almost to the date, September 2020. And in this year, it seems like it's almost been 2-3 years. I feel like I've known Garrett a lot longer than just 1 year because so much went down. So I actually reached out to him for my Flute 360 podcast, and I wanted to have him as a guest. And so he is actually episode 126 through that platform. And we got to talking, and I noticed, just the passion and the love that he has for music education and music business. And my eyes lit up. I just wanted to have him in my orbit that much more. And so I started attending his pivoting webinars. He actually was my career coach for some time. And then he invited me to be a presenter through UMBS 2021. And since then, the rest is history. We are excitedly putting together UMBS 2022. We've started a podcast together, The Pivoting Musician. We're putting together a remote class, also The Pivoting Musician. And so our worlds literally have interlocked. So whether he's, down for it or not, we're in it for the long haul.
Well, I guess before we go any further, we should probably tell our listeners what the name of this event is. It's called the Ultimate Music Business Summit, and it's going to be in its second year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did this come about, Garrett?
Well, part of what I do professionally is I coach other creatives. And a lot of what we were dealing with last year in the height of the government lockdowns was the mindset of what was going on as a musician. Because everyone I know, myself included, lost opportunities. Performances were canceled, and some people lost tens of thousands of dollars of potential income. There was a lot of fear and anxiety around what the future was going to look like. And I wanted to provide a ray of hope. I also wanted to encourage people to continue thinking businessly, because when you do that, there are strategies and opportunities that come up. So even in the midst of these really hard times, you can carve a way forward. So I put together this summit on my own. I got all these presenters together, and I built it as a way to write your own stimulus check. Because, like as I've said already, you choose to be your own boss. You choose to find the opportunities where you can serve your audience and you can help them get what they want, need, and desire. And there's an unlimited amount of, well, opportunities at that intersection of their needs and desires and what you can bring to the table. So I wanted to encourage people and teach people this. The summit went really well, but it was a crazy amount of work to build it. And Heidi and a few others were just, Heidi did 2 killer presentations, by the way. So I invited her and another colleague of ours, Arthur Brewer, to help me do it better. So together we are the executive committee, and I couldn't be more grateful for these two, because they have taken my vision and expanded it and helped me do things that I could not do on my own. And so this next year is going to be even better.
That's great. And I looked through your list of presenters, and they really cover an incredibly broad spectrum. In fact, there's a few I know very, very well. Alex Shapiro, the composer, has been a guest on my podcast before. She's just a sweetheart and a great, great, great talent. And then you got a guy by the name of Jason Heath, who actually helped me get my podcast started. He does his Contrabass Confidential, I believe is the name of his.
Conversations.
Oh, that's it. Contrabass Conversations. And he is just a brilliant young man, just incredible. And he gave me a lot of help when I was first getting going with my podcast. And then, of course, Dr. Michael Hall. And Michael is a world-class violist. And he also taught for me when I was president at Vandercook College of Music. So, and you got a whole bunch more. So kind of give me a thumbnail of the spectrum that all of your presenters covered during this summit.
Sure. So just to kind of take one step back, there is one keynote speaker, Dr. Drew X. Coles, and also we have 36 presenters. And you're right, Charlie, there is a wide array of different topics, and there's something there for everybody. So I kind of checked out the presenters list last night just to jog my memory, because I don't really trust my memory all that well. And I was looking at this, broad spectrum and pulling out some generalizations. So we have topics that cover audio production, how to create a digital course, collaboration and networking, monetization and finances, website design, how to run and build a private music studio, grant writing, tech and music education, and so much more. So I know that was a slew of things, but really I think those 7 or 8 topics kind of highlight everything that you would see at the summit.
Most of my listeners are probably band directors of some sort. It's called band talk. And so if I'm a band director, a middle school band director, a high school band director, college band director, or just an interested musician, what can I gain by attending the summit, Garrett?
From my perspective, there's an enormous amount that can be gained, even from someone, like you said, who's in a band director position, because you have an objective. You want to help young musicians grow in musicianship, gain skill, and at the same time, you're working with outside groups, so parent groups, administration, and you're constantly seeking funding sources through sponsorship or grants or whatever. And that skill set is virtually the same skill set that is required when you're running your own business. So when you're talking about how to network well, when you're talking about how to serve an audience, that audience can include parents, students, and administrators. And when you start giving people and helping them get what they need and what they want, then you can kind of steer the ship a little bit. Zig Ziglar, you remember Zig Ziglar, the famous sales trainer? Yeah. One of his famous sayings was, you can have anything you want in the world if first you help everyone else get what they want. And that is kind of the primary operating principle around running a business, is you help other people first. So a band director can come to this event and they can listen to these strategies about how to find opportunities, how to build community, right? We have some speakers talking about engaging locally and globally and in other ways. And that's a way for you to just start thinking about your band program in a bigger way than just what happens in your classroom or in your building or even in your district. And myself and our other colleague, Arthur Brewer, we're going to be presenting on how we both created composer and residency positions with local bands. Him with the Tualatin Valley Orchestra, or band and orchestra, actually, outside of Portland, and me here in the Lincoln Community Concert Band, because we're trying to engage people and bring, we'll raise the bar, bring awareness to new music. And so there's ways that band directors can apply what's happening in the summit in new and innovative ways. And I think if you come with a student mindset and an open learning mindset, new ideas will come to you. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, I really am so glad to hear you say that, because, I was a high school band director for 18 years before I went to the college. And you know what? You are a businessman when you're a high school band director. I mean, I took my group to the Tournament of Roses parade, and we played at the Olympics, and we had to raise so much money. And like you say, work with the parents and the whole promotional aspect of how do you promote your program to get the community involvement, the community support. And regardless if you're teaching high school or elementary, guess what? You're recruiting 365 days a year. I mean, that's what recruitment is. And recruitment is business, right? It's just drumming up interest and support for what you're doing. So I'm so glad, Garrett, that you articulated it that way. That was really, really terrific. And Heidi, you work with college students, and college students have this thing where I'm going to go to college and be a performance major. And then after like 3 weeks, they go like, man, I don't want to practice this hard, or I don't have this kind of chops. I got to switch my track. So I can see a lot of benefit for a session like this for college students as well, don't you?
Oh my goodness, yes. And I don't care if Jane or Joe, Maria or Jose is listening to this right now and you're a performance major, you're going to teach in some capacity. And if you are an education major or a composer, you are going to wear other hats too. And you have to start during your student years, start planting that entrepreneurial seed now, because 3-4 years goes by super duper fast. And when I'm doing air quotes right now, but when you enter into the air quote real world, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my goodness, the music market is asking us to be more businessly every single day. And so I encourage you, and I'm really lovingly encourage you just to start planting that entrepreneurial seed now while you're in school, so you can ask the right questions. Use your mentors around you to start really opening up your mind to the possibilities for your music career. And so going to summits like this that are really cost effective, that are budget friendly, and start putting 30 plus experts in your back pocket to hone your skill sets to think more businessly is going to be a huge asset for your career. So start planting those seeds now, because your future self will really thank you later. And so when it's time to gather your harvest, it's ready to go.
Well, the Ultimate Music Summit is going to be happening on January 6th to 8th of 2022. Garrett, it sounds like a wonderful event. You got any other thing you'd like to add?
I do. Thank you. I want to piggyback on something you said just a few minutes ago for the band directors. We have one presenter who's the president of the board for a small opera company in Illinois, in Quincy, called the Muddy River Opera Company. And this man has turned the organization around. Most regional music ensembles that are nonprofits operate on a shoestring, and even then possibly even in the red. But he has thought differently. He's brought, because he's also an entrepreneur and a business owner, he's brought that mindset into this organization. And they have been funding their operas in the black before opening night, meaning he's found a way to market well, bring people on board, and engage his community. And he's going to give a presentation on marketing for nonprofit organizations, which is the exact presentation that band directors should go to. How do you get the community on board? How do you promote your concerts, your events, your tours, your competitions, all that? So I really wanted to make sure I got that in there. And go to musicsummit.biz. That's where you can see the list of presenters. You can look at the schedule. We have so many things happening over the 3 days that there's going to be 2 presentations at a time. So we have a 2-track event, just like a real conference. And like Heidi said, there's going to be a keynote. And then we're going to have some one-to-one speed networking events that people can attend. Yeah, like Heidi also said, we want this to be budget friendly. So there's a real low price version that just gets you in the door. And the reason that we're charging it all is because we have platform expenses. We're running this on a software called Run the World, which is a great online conference platform. But if you get the VIP ticket, then you get to access recordings of all the videos, all the presentations. So you don't have to miss a thing. You don't have to worry about being at every presentation. And then the VIP ticket also gets you into a second room afterwards, so where you can ask questions of the presenters. So if you go to that nonprofit marketing one and you have the VIP ticket, immediately after, you can ask him questions. And there are a special cocktail party after the keynote presentation for VIP ticket holders. And again, it's a low-cost thing. Like the cost to get a VIP ticket is cheaper than any other conference you'll ever go to. And we are building this for you because we want people like you, the people who are listening to this, to be able to grow in their career.
Heidi, any last thoughts?
Oh my goodness, I think Garrett captured that very well. The only thing that I would add to that is reach out to us. I promise you, Garrett, Arthur, and we do not bite. So if you have a question, if you have a request, we want to extend our arms and welcome you into our orbit. And also, if you wanted, us to introduce you to somebody on our presenters list, if you see Jared Tate, for example, or Glory St. Germain, and you're like, oh my goodness, I've watched them from afar. Could you introduce me to so-and-so? Yeah, let's start bringing in more people into your orbit and start bringing that orbit in tighter because we can't do it alone. And people are essential for everybody's growth.
Dr. Heidi K. Begay, Dr. Garrett Hope, thank you so very much, folks. It's called the Ultimate Music Business Summit, and it's coming January 6 to 8, 2022. And you can learn more by visiting musicsummit.biz. Hey, guys, thanks for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, Charles.
Thank you, Charlie.
The ability to make and create and work within the music world has never been more accessible. And so many of us have the want to, but not the how to. And just like when I started my podcast almost 2 years ago, I just jumped in and started swimming. Fortunately, along the way, there were some folks who helped me find my place. And by the way, they are some of the same people you will get to hear if you participate in the Ultimate Music Business Summit. And that's happening on January 6 to 8, 2022. Check them out. Just Google Ultimate Music Business Summit or visit www.musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz. And a special thanks goes out to Dr. Heidi K. Begay and Dr. Garrett Hope for sharing this wonderful information. And guys, I know you're going to have a successful event. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and I sincerely hope that you will tell your friends and colleagues about Band Talk. I'll be back with more great conversations, so keep on listening and let everyone know that Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends is back. So thanks for your support, and until the next time, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.